When Vesuvius buried Pompeii in 79 AD, the city had fast food restaurants, running water, public toilets connected to sewage systems, underfloor heating, apartment blocks 7 stories tall, and a legal code sophisticated enough that lawyers still study it today. Rome was not ancient in the way we imagine ancient. It was, in many ways, more modern than any city that existed for 1,000 years after it fell. Here are 22 facts about ancient Rome that will make you wonder how we managed to go so far backwards. Rome had fast food restaurants. Rome had fast food restaurants. The streets of Pompeii contained over 80 thermopolia, the Roman equivalent of fast food counters. These were stone counters with large terracotta jars sunk into them, kept warm by hot coals underneath, containing ready-to-eat food, lentils, stews, wine, and cooked meats. Customers would stop at the counter, point at what they wanted, eat standing up, and move on. Archaeologists have found the remains of actual food still inside the jars at Pompeii, including duck bones, fish, snails, and pork. Most urban Romans did not have kitchens. Their apartments, the insulae, were multi-story wooden or brick structures where cooking was a fire hazard, and often prohibited. Eating out was not a luxury, it was the default. Rome's cities were full of street food vendors, bakeries, wine bars, and takeaway counters in the same way that a modern city center is full of coffee shops and food stalls. The thermopolium was not a novelty. It was ordinary daily life for the majority of Rome's urban population, and it functioned with a familiarity that would be recognizable to anyone who has ever grabbed lunch from a counter and eaten it on the go. Roman concrete gets stronger over time. Roman concrete outperforms modern concrete. Roman concrete, opus caementicium, is one of the most remarkable engineering achievements in history, and we spent centuries not understanding why. Modern concrete, made with Portland cement, begins degrading within decades. Structures exposed to seawater crack as saltwater corrodes the steel reinforcement. Roman harbor structures built 2,000 years ago are not only still intact, they are stronger than when they were built. In 2017, researchers at the University of California, Berkeley, discovered why. Roman concrete was made with volcanic ash, specifically pozzolana, from the region around Pozzuoli near Naples, mixed with seawater and lime. When seawater permeates the concrete, it reacts with the volcanic minerals to form aluminous tobermorite crystals, which actually reinforce the concrete over time. The longer it sits in seawater, the stronger it gets. Roman engineers discovered this formula empirically, through observation and experience, without understanding the chemistry. Modern engineers are now actively studying Roman concrete to develop more durable and environmentally friendly building materials. The best concrete recipe in the world was invented 2,000 years ago, and then forgotten for nearly 15 centuries. Rome had underfloor heating. Rome had underfloor heating. The hypocaust was a Roman central heating system that circulated hot air beneath raised floors and through hollow walls, keeping rooms warm in winter. It was used in private homes, public baths, and military installations across the empire. The system worked by burning wood or charcoal in a furnace room, with the hot gases channeled through a network of pillar stacks supporting the floor above. The heat rose through the floor tiles and through terracotta pipes in the walls. Wealthy Romans had hypocausts in their homes as a matter of course. Roman soldiers stationed at Hadrian's Wall in northern Britain had underfloor heating in their barracks. When Rome fell and the Western Empire collapsed, the knowledge and infrastructure to maintain these systems was lost. Underfloor heating would not be widely reinstalled in European buildings until the 20th century, roughly 1,500 years later. The concept that a floor could be warm, rather than cold stone, was a Roman amenity that medieval Europe did not have, and that most people in the world today still do not have in their homes. The Roman welfare state. Rome had a welfare state. The Roman annona was a state-organized system for the subsidized or free distribution of grain to the citizens of Rome. By the late Republic and early Empire, approximately 200,000 Roman citizens in the city of Rome received free grain distributions, the fermentatio, funded by the state from grain imported primarily from Egypt and North Africa. This was not charity. It was an entitlement of Roman citizenship, a political institution that emperors maintained because disrupting it risked riots and political instability. The system was later expanded to include olive oil, wine, and pork. The Roman state also operated public baths, free at point of use or heavily subsidized. It maintained aqueducts delivering clean water to public fountains throughout the city. It funded public games and entertainment at state expense. The Roman concept that a state owed its citizens food, water, sanitation, and entertainment was sophisticated enough that historians have explicitly compared it to modern welfare states. The comparison is imperfect. Roman citizenship excluded slaves, women had limited political rights, and the system served political stability as much as human welfare. But the structural parallels are real and deliberate. Roman roads are still in use. Roman roads are still in use today. The Roman road network stretched approximately 400,000 kilometers across the empire at its peak, roughly equivalent to 10 times around the Earth. Roman engineers built roads to a consistent standard, a deep foundation of large stones, a middle layer of gravel and smaller stones, and a surface of flat-fitted stones, cambered in the center to drain rainwater. Many Roman roads have been continuously in use since they were built. The Via Appia, the Appian Way, built in 312 BC to connect Rome to the southeast of the Italian peninsula, is still drivable today. In Britain, the A2 road from London to Dover, the A5 from London to Holyhead, and numerous other major routes follow Roman alignments. The straight-line geometry that characterizes Roman roads influenced European road networks for 2 millennia. Before Roman roads, travel through most of Europe meant navigating dirt tracks that became impassable in winter. The Roman road system created the first reliable, year-round overland transport network in European history, connecting markets, moving armies, and enabling the administrative coherence of an empire spanning 3 continents. Rome had a shopping mall. Rome had a shopping mall. Trajan's Market, built in Rome around 100 to 110 AD, was a multi-story commercial complex containing approximately 150 individual shops and offices arranged across several levels, connected by a vaulted main hall. It was built into the slope of the Quirinal Hill and served both commercial and administrative functions. Different levels sold different goods, wine and oil on the lower floors, pepper and spices on an upper floor, fish kept alive in tanks fed by a water supply. It was, in architectural and commercial terms, a shopping mall. The complex also served administrative purposes, distributing the grain dole and handling state business. Trajan's Market still stands in Rome today, better preserved than most ancient structures, because its semicircular brick construction proved extremely robust. The idea that a dedicated multi-story commercial building could organize retail across specialized sections, connected by common corridors, with administrative services alongside consumer goods, was not reinvented in the modern era. It was built in Rome 2,000 years ago and can still be visited. Julius Caesar's assassination. Only one wound was fatal. Julius Caesar's 23 stab wounds. On the Ides of March, 44 BC, Julius Caesar was stabbed 23 times by a group of senators in the theater of Pompeii. He died. But a post-mortem examination conducted by the physician Antistius, one of the earliest recorded forensic autopsies, determined that only one of the 23 wounds was fatal, a stab to the chest that penetrated the second intercostal space and reached the aorta. The other 22 wounds were serious, but not immediately lethal. The assassins, over 60 senators were involved in the conspiracy, had apparently agreed to each strike a blow to implicate themselves equally, but the crowd of stabbers meant most blows were deflected, shallow, or struck non-vital areas. Caesar reportedly wrapped his toga around himself as he fell, either to die with dignity, or to prevent his body from being seen in an undignified position. Anticius's autopsy finding was recorded by the historian Suetonius. It is considered one of the earliest documented forensic medical examinations in history, and its conclusion, one fatal wound, 22 that were not, has never been seriously disputed by modern forensic medicine. The Colosseum had a retractable roof. The Colosseum had a retractable roof. The Flavian Amphitheater, the Colosseum, could seat between 50,000 and 80,000 spectators and was equipped with a velarium, a retractable awning system that could be extended over the audience to provide shade from the Roman sun. The velarium was operated by a team of sailors from the imperial fleet at Misenum, who were stationed in Rome specifically for this purpose. The sailors used a system of ropes, pulleys, and masts around the top rim of the structure to extend and retract the awning, which was made of canvas and could not cover the arena floor itself, only the seating areas. The logistics of managing a retractable roof over a structure, seating tens of thousands of people, operated by a dedicated crew of naval personnel, represent an engineering and organizational achievement that would not be replicated at comparable scale until modern stadiums with retractable roof systems in the 20th century. The Colosseum also had a sophisticated underground system, the Hypogeum, with elevators and trapdoors to raise animals and gladiators directly into the arena from below. Roman graffiti in Pompeii. The graffiti of Pompeii. The walls of Pompeii contain thousands of pieces of graffiti, preserved under volcanic ash for nearly 2,000 years, that offer an uncensored window into the daily life, humor, and preoccupations of ordinary Romans. Scholars have catalogued over 11,000 inscriptions. They include political campaign slogans, insults, declarations of love, crude jokes, advertisements, and philosophical observations. Examples include, Successus the weaver loves the innkeeper's slave girl named Iris. She doesn't care for him, but he begs her to take pity on him. Written by his rival. So long, another. I have screwed many girls here, another. Gaius Pumedius Diphilus was here, on the 6th day before the nuns of October, in the year of Marcus Lepidus and Quintus Catulus as consuls. The impulse to write on walls, to leave evidence of existence, to document love affairs and rivalries and mundane presence, is identical across 2,000 years. The emotional vocabulary of Pompeii's graffiti is immediately recognizable. Petty, funny, affectionate, competitive, body. The Romans were not distant historical figures, operating in an alien moral universe. They were people who scratched their feelings into plaster and hoped someone would read them. Roman women had significant legal rights. Roman women and the law. Roman women occupied a more complex legal position than the simple picture of male-dominated antiquity suggests. While women could not vote or hold political office, by the late Republic and Imperial period, Roman women of citizen status could own property independently, inherit and bequeath wealth, run businesses, divorce their husbands, and bring legal cases. A woman married under the sine manu system, which became increasingly common in the later Republic, remained under her father's legal authority rather than her husband's, meaning her husband had no automatic claim over her property. Wealthy Roman women could be major property owners and business operators in their own right. Eumetia, a wealthy woman in Pompeii, funded the construction of a large public building in the Forum, an act of civic ergotism that was commemorated with a statue erected in her honor by the Fullers Guild. Livia, wife of Augustus, exerted political influence that contemporaries acknowledged openly. The legal rights of Roman women varied enormously by class, period, and circumstance, and daily life frequently diverged from legal theory. But the formal legal capacity for women to own and manage property independently was present in a way that would not exist in many European legal systems again until the 19th century. Roman medicine and field surgery. Roman military medicine. The Roman army had the most advanced military medical system in the ancient world. Each legion had a trained medical corps, the Medici, and field hospitals called valetudinaria that were built as permanent structures in military camps across the empire. These hospitals were laid out with individual wards, ventilation systems, and access to running water. Roman surgeons used specialized instruments, scalpels, bone saws, forceps, catheters, and surgical needles, many of which closely resemble modern equivalents. They understood the importance of clean instruments and running water, even without germ theory. They performed amputations, trephinations of the skull, cataract surgery, and the removal of arrowheads and weapon fragments. The survival rates for Roman military patients were higher than for soldiers in most European armies until the late 19th century, when antiseptic technique and modern anesthesia were introduced. Roman medical knowledge was synthesized by Galen of Pergamon in the 2nd century AD, and Galen's texts remained the dominant medical authority in Europe until the Renaissance. Roman medicine was not merely good for its time. Parts of it remained the best available for over 1,000 years. Rome's population wasn't matched for 1,500 years. Rome's population collapsed and took centuries to recover. At its peak in the 2nd century AD, the city of Rome had a population of approximately 1 million people, making it the most populous city in the Western world and one of the largest in the ancient world overall. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD and the subsequent Visigothic sacks and political collapse, Rome's population fell catastrophically. By the 7th century, estimates suggest it had fallen to around 20,000 to 30,000 people, a reduction of over 95%. The aqueducts that had supplied clean water to 1 million people went unrepaired and ran dry. The vast apartment blocks were abandoned and collapsed. The forums and markets emptied. Medieval Rome was a small, impoverished city living among the ruins of a civilization it barely understood. The city of Rome did not reach 1 million inhabitants again until around 1930, roughly 1,800 years after it had first achieved that population. The physical infrastructure of ancient Rome, its roads, its aqueducts, its buildings, outlasted the society that built them by centuries, slowly decaying in a city that had forgotten what they were for. The Byzantine Empire was Rome. The Roman Empire didn't fall until 1453. The traditional date for the fall of the Roman Empire is 476 AD, when the Germanic chieftain Odoacer deposed the last Western emperor, Romulus Augustulus. But the Roman Empire did not end in 476. The Eastern Roman Empire, centered on Constantinople, the city now called Istanbul, continued operating as a functioning state for nearly another 1,000 years. Its citizens called themselves Romans. Their emperors held the title of Roman Emperor. Their legal system was Roman law. Their official language was eventually Greek, but they understood themselves as the continuation of Rome. This empire, which historians call the Byzantine Empire, a term the Byzantines themselves never used, fell only in 1453, when Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II conquered Constantinople. The Roman Empire, therefore, lasted not from 753 BC to 476 AD, as usually taught, but from 753 BC to 1453 AD, over 2,200 years. When Columbus was preparing for his voyage to the Americas in 1492, the fall of Rome had happened only 39 years earlier. The Roman Empire was a medieval institution that ended in living memory of the Renaissance. Gladiators were celebrities. Gladiators were celebrities with fan clubs. Roman gladiators were not simply condemned criminals or slaves forced to fight. Many were professional athletes who trained at dedicated schools, the ludi, under specialist trainers, ate high-calorie diets designed by nutritionists, received medical treatment from dedicated physicians, and lived in organized barracks. The diet of gladiators, reconstructed from skeletal isotope analysis at Ephesus, was primarily vegetarian and carbohydrate-heavy, barley, beans, and dried fruit, designed to build a layer of subcutaneous fat that would protect vital organs from shallow sword cuts while bleeding dramatically for the audience. Gladiators attracted devoted fans. Graffiti in Pompeii records specific gladiators' records and their attractiveness to women. Successful gladiators were commercially valuable, their trainers hired them out for fights, and the best could negotiate for retirement after a certain number of bouts. Some voluntarily re-entered the profession after retirement because the pay was exceptional. The Emperor Commodus, famously, performed in the arena himself. Gladiatorial combat was violent, often fatal, and built on the exploitation of enslaved and condemned people. But it was also a professional sport with careers, statistics, celebrity, and adoring fans. The Romans would have understood modern professional sports culture immediately. The Roman postal system, the cursus publicus, Rome's postal network. The Roman state operated a sophisticated communications network called the cursus publicus, a system of relay stations, fresh horses, and official carriages that connected the empire from Scotland to Mesopotamia. At its peak, the system maintained relay stations every 10 to 15 Roman miles along the major roads, with fresh horses available at each station, allowing official messages to travel at speeds of approximately 50 to 75 kilometers per day. Urgent imperial messages could move faster. The network was originally restricted to official government use, military dispatches, imperial orders, administrative correspondence, but was gradually extended to allow private use by those with the appropriate authorization. The cursus publicus enabled the Roman emperor to govern an empire spanning 3 continents from a single capital city, a logistical achievement that no subsequent European political entity matched until the development of modern postal and telegraph systems in the 19th century. When Napoleon reorganized the French postal system in the early 19th century, he was, consciously or not, rebuilding something that Rome had already built and maintained for centuries. Hadrian's Wall was built in about 6 years. Hadrian's Wall was built in 6 years. Hadrian's Wall, the 118-kilometer fortification running across the width of northern Britain from the Solway Firth to the River Tyne, was built between approximately 122 and 128 AD, a period of about 6 years. The wall was constructed of stone in the east and turf in the west, with a fort or mile castle every Roman mile, watchtowers between each mile castle, and a large ditch on the northern side. It was garrisoned by units from across the empire, not just Romans, but Batavians from the Netherlands, Tungrians from Belgium, Asturians from Spain, and Syrians from the eastern provinces. The construction required quarrying and transporting millions of tons of stone across rugged terrain, using hand tools and animal labor. Modern estimates suggest the project required tens of thousands of workers working simultaneously across the entire length of the wall. Inscribed building stones from Hadrian's Wall survive, recording which legionary century built each section, a quality control mechanism that shows the wall was constructed to a managed program with accountability at every level. A 118-kilometer fortified wall, built in 6 years, 2,000 years ago, in northern England. The Roman calendar and Caesar's reform. Julius Caesar invented the calendar we still use. Before Julius Caesar's reforms in 46 BC, the Roman calendar was a mess. It was a lunar calendar that had drifted so far from the solar year that the calendar months no longer corresponded to the actual seasons. Harvest festivals were falling in spring, and the calendar was 3 months ahead of the astronomical year. In 46 BC, Caesar, advised by the Egyptian astronomer Sosigenes of Alexandria, implemented a radical reform, the Julian calendar, a solar calendar of 365 days with a leap year every 4 years. To correct the existing drift, Caesar inserted an extra 90 days into 46 BC, making it 445 days long, the longest year in history, called the Year of Confusion. The Julian calendar was accurate enough that it remained the standard calendar in most of Europe for over 1,600 years. The Gregorian calendar, introduced in 1582 and now used worldwide, is a minor correction of the Julian calendar, adjusting the leap year rule slightly to account for the fact that the solar year is not exactly 365.25 days. The calendar on your phone is, in its fundamental structure, a product of Julius Caesar's administrative reform in 46 BC. Roman aqueducts. The Roman water supply. At its peak, the city of Rome was supplied by 11 major aqueducts, delivering approximately 1 million cubic meters of fresh water per day to the city, roughly 1,000 liters per person per day, more than many modern cities supply. The aqueducts were engineering marvels. Some ran for over 90 kilometers from their mountain sources, maintained at a precise gradient of about 1 in 4,800, a drop of just 20 centimeters per kilometer, to keep the water flowing by gravity alone. No pumps, no engines, just precision surveying and stone construction. The water fed public fountains throughout the city, the primary source for most residents, as well as the 1,000 public baths, the private homes of the wealthy, and the sewage system. The Aqua Claudia and the Annio Novus, built under Emperor Claudius in the 1st century AD, ran on arched bridges for significant portions of their length, the arcade form that became iconic Roman architecture. When the aqueducts failed after Rome's fall, the city became dependent on the Tiber, a muddy, disease-ridden river, for its water supply, a regression that contributed directly to the medieval city's poverty and poor health. Clean water infrastructure that Rome built in the 1st century was not rebuilt to comparable scale in Europe until the 19th century. Rome had public libraries. Rome had free public libraries. Julius Caesar first proposed a public library for Rome, and the idea was realized by Gaius Asinius Pollio, who opened the first public library in Rome around 39 BC. Augustus subsequently built 2 more. By the 4th century AD, the city of Rome had at least 28 public libraries, institutions where citizens could read scrolls without charge. The libraries typically contained two sections, one for Greek texts and one for Latin texts, reflecting the bilingual educated culture of the Roman upper class. Libraries were also established across the empire in major provincial cities. Trajan's Forum contained a large library complex. The library at Alexandria, the most famous ancient library, was under Roman governance during its later centuries. The Roman public library system established a precedent that educated individuals and governments have returned to repeatedly. The idea that a community should maintain a collection of knowledge accessible to all citizens at no individual cost. The public library, as an institution of democratic civic life, was not a Victorian invention. It was Roman. The Roman economy. Rome had sophisticated banking and insurance. The Roman economy was substantially more sophisticated than popular imagination suggests. Roman bankers, argentari and numulari, operated deposit accounts, made loans at interest, arranged currency exchanges, and transferred funds between cities through a system of written orders that functioned like early checks. Interest rates were legally regulated. Roman merchants used contracts, partnerships, and forms of risk-sharing for sea voyages, the nauticum finis or maritime loan, that functioned as a precursor to marine insurance. If a ship sank, the loan was cancelled. If it arrived safely, the lender received the principal, plus a substantial premium that reflected the risk. Roman commerce spanned the entire known world. Roman coins have been found in India, sub-Saharan Africa, Scandinavia, and China. Roman merchants traded silk, spices, glassware, grain, wine, olive oil, metals, and slaves across a network that connected 3 continents. The Roman economy at its peak has been estimated to have had a GDP per capita comparable to early modern Europe, not medieval, but early modern. It was not a primitive agrarian subsistence economy. It was a complex, monetized, internationally connected market economy with financial instruments, legal enforcement of contracts, and professional financial intermediaries. Roman sewage and public health. Rome had sewage infrastructure. The Cloaca Maxima, the Great Sewer, was one of the earliest and most ambitious sewage systems in the ancient world. Originally constructed in the 6th century BC to drain the marshy valley between Rome's hills, and eventually extended to channel waste directly into the Tiber. By the imperial period, Rome's sewage system connected to the public latrines, the foraci, multi-seat toilet facilities flushed by running water. Public toilets in Rome were social spaces. Romans sat side by side without partitions, conversing as a matter of course. The waste from private homes in the insulae was typically disposed of in cesspits or simply thrown into the street. The sewage system served public buildings and wealthier private homes rather than the entire urban population. Rome also understood the connection between clean water supply and public health at an empirical level. Even without germ theory, the aqueducts drew water from mountain springs, not from the Tiber, specifically because mountain spring water was cleaner and safer. The Romans did not know about bacteria, but they knew that cities needed clean water in and dirty water out, and they built the infrastructure to achieve it on a scale that would not be matched in Europe until the late 19th century. The fall of Rome was not a single event. The fall of Rome took 300 years. There was no single moment when Rome fell. The decline of the Western Roman Empire was a process spanning roughly 3 centuries, from the crisis of the 3rd century beginning in 235 AD to the conventional endpoint of 476 AD, and arguably extending to the Byzantine Empire's fall in 1453. During those centuries, the empire fragmented and reunified multiple times. Multiple emperors reigned simultaneously. The capital moved from Rome to Mediolanum to Ravenna. Barbarian generals commanded Roman armies. Barbarian kingdoms formed within Roman territory with Roman approval. The people living through this period did not experience a dramatic collapse. They experienced gradual, uneven change, with some regions prospering and others declining, with Roman law and Latin culture persisting long after Roman political authority had fragmented. Edward Gibbon's The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, published in 1776, shaped the modern image of a catastrophic civilizational collapse. The reality was slower, messier, more complex, and more interesting. Rome did not fall. It transformed into the Catholic Church, into the legal foundations of Europe, into 1,000 years of Byzantine civilization, and into the cultural bedrock that the Renaissance would excavate and rebuild upon. Thank you for watching. Rome was not a civilization that happened a long time ago, and has nothing to do with us. Its roads are still under our feet. Its legal concepts are still in our courts. Its calendar is still on our phones. Its concrete is still holding up its harbors. We did not inherit Rome, we are still living inside it. Subscribe for more, and we will see you in the next video.